I want to tell you a story, and it won't just be a story about art or business. It will be a story about the human spirit, about stubbornness, about a dream that seemed too weak to survive, but ended up conquering the world. Imagine Japan after the war. The streets still smell of ashes. The houses are destroyed, children run barefoot among the rubble, adults think only about how to survive until tomorrow. This is a time when no one believed in beauty. Everything seemed too broken to dream. But it was then, amidst the darkness and dirt, in a small room by the dim light of a lamp, an idea was born. There I sat. In front of me were sheets of paper, ink, an old table that wobbled under my arm. I had nothing else. No money, no support, no understanding. People looked at me and said, "Why are you wasting your time on drawings? This is childish nonsense. Nobody needs it." They laughed when they heard the word cartoon. And even those who loved me advised, "Leave it. Find a normal job. Save yourself from hunger." But I felt something else. When I drew, the lines on the paper came to life. And no matter how poor it looked, no matter how absurd it seemed to others, I saw a world before me that did not yet exist. And this world was telling me, "Don't give up. Your dream is bigger than the darkness." I didn't know then that one day my drawings would be called anime, that they would be sold in hundreds of countries, that millions of people around the world would laugh and cry with me. That night, I had only one thing: stubbornness. And if you stay with me until the end, I will show you not only the path that animation has taken in Japan, I will tell you about the falls and betrayals, about the moments when it seemed that all was lost, and about the miracle when the world opened its doors to us. I will give you the lessons that I have learned from my journey. Because this story is not only mine, it can be yours too. Because every big dream starts the same way, with a small lamp in a dark room. I sat at my desk and looked at the sheets that still smelled of fresh ink. Every line was my hope. Every shadow on the paper was a dream that had not yet been born. I had nothing but this lamp, a cigarette, and a voice that whispered, "You can create something greater than anyone believes." The world around me was against me. After the war, no one thought about entertainment. My parents advised me to find a normal job. My friends laughed. Draw in your notebook, but don't expect anything serious. Factories roared, selling cheap goods so that people could survive. And here I was trying to do the impossible, to draw moving worlds. But I didn't give up. I painted at night, when the whole house was asleep, when night covered the city, and my room smelled of ink and old paper. Each frame took hours, sometimes days. Every movement had to feel alive, breathing, speaking. I felt something being born from these lines that no one had ever seen before. I was haunted by real problems. There was not enough money for paper, ink was running out, and neighbors shouted that I was making noise and wasting electricity. Once I left a drawing on the windowsill, and the wind tore it apart, and I felt that the world was laughing at my dream. And yet I got up, gathered the remaining sheets of paper, and continued to draw. I didn't know yet that this path would be thorny, that I would face my first major crises, defeats, and rejections, that I would have to fight not only with the outside world, but also with the doubts within myself. But then, sitting in my small room, I realized one thing. If I give up now, I will never know if my dream could have become a reality. And I decided, I will not give up. I will keep drawing until the world sees my story. The first steps are always the hardest. I submitted my work to the first screenings and received only laughter and rejections. The producers looked at me like I was crazy. "Why do you do this? Children will play with dolls anyway. Nobody watches adult movies," they would say. I heard these words, and every time my heart sank. I felt alone in a world that didn't understand my dream. People I respected told me to quit. Debt piled up, the electricity went out, friends and family began to question whether I should continue. One day, my room almost burned down from an old lamp, and I was left with nothing but sheets of black ash. I could have given up. Many people my age would have given up, but I remembered why I started. As I drew, the lines on the paper came to life. When I saw the first reactions of children laughing or crying at my short animations, I knew it was worth it. I realized that my heart was ahead of my fear. And then came the turning point. I realized that I couldn't copy the West. I couldn't try to please everyone. My anime had to be my own, authentic. I started looking for my own style, my own themes, my own stories. That's how the first spark came. A small series about the adventures of a boy and his fantastic friends. There was no budget, but the idea was stronger than any limitations. It was a moment when I felt that every crisis, every word no, every wind that scattered my drawings became fuel for my determination. I realized one important thing. Defeat is not the end, as long as you don't stop drawing. And that's when I made a promise to myself. I will weather any storm to make my story come alive. Because if I give up now, the world will never see what I can create. After the darkness and the rejections, the first glimmer of hope appeared. A small series I created in my room was broadcast on local television. I remember that day, the smell of paint, the rumble of the old projector, the noise of the equipment in the studio. I stood behind the camera, my heart beating wildly, and looked at the screens. And a miracle happened. Children laughed. Adults cried. Someone applauded. I realized that my idea worked, that my voice had found its place. I felt that I could tell stories that touched the heart. But that was just the beginning. There were still many problems. Money was tight. The studio was barely surviving. The crew was working nights, sometimes without even getting paid. There were times when I would fall asleep on the floor, holding a pencil in my hands, and it felt like the whole world was against me. And that's when I took the first bold step. I decided to risk everything for the sake of creativity. I abandoned traditional plots and began to experiment. New characters, more complex stories, emotions that had never been seen in anime before. It was dangerous. Critics shouted that I was going in the wrong direction, that it would ruin everything. But I heard inside myself, this is what the world is waiting for. And he answered. The small screens filled with light. The children repeated the words of the characters, the adults discussed the plot, and I felt that our work was beginning to take on a life of its own. My little room with a lamp was no longer just my world. It was becoming a window into people's hearts. This moment taught me the most important thing. Don't wait for permission from the world. Find your voice, and the world will start listening. I remember the day my team and I stood in the middle of the studio and looked at each other. Old desks, tattered walls, piles of papers, and we stood in the middle of chaos, but with one thought. We're going to do this. We're going to risk everything, because otherwise we'll never know what we can create. Creating the first full-fledged series was a test of all our strength. We worked at night, often without sleep, without food, on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Each frame, each scene was like tearing out a part of our soul and weaving it into a sheet of paper. Sometimes I caught myself thinking, maybe I'm crazy, but my heart told me, without this risk, there is no chance of creating something real. Crises followed one after another. The studio's economic instability, sponsors' refusal to finance the project, the threat of closure. All this hung over us like a dark cloud. There were moments when I would return home, sit on the floor of my small room, and just cry, thinking, maybe I'm wasting my life. But then I remembered the first smiles of children, the first emotions of the audience from my short films, and understood. If I give up, I will never give the world my voice. One day, I made a decisive step that changed everything. I took everything the studio had, even the last money for studio rent and salaries, and poured it into the series, into every scene, every movement, every note of music. It was like jumping into the abyss. Someone on the team was scared. What if it fails? I only answered one thing. Even if it fails, we will know that we risked everything for a dream. And that is better than never trying at all. We worked to the roar of old fans, the smell of paint and paper mixed with coffee and cigarette smoke. Nights turned into days, days into months. Sometimes it seemed that the project would consume us, but at the same time it nourished us, kept us on our feet, gave meaning to every minute. We discussed plot developments, characters, musical themes, and each decision felt like a step into the future. And when the series finally aired, we stood together in the studio, our hearts pounding like never before. I remember the smell of freshly printed credits, the flickering lights, and the trembling of our hands. The initial reactions from the audience were magical. Children laughed, cried, and repeated the characters' words. Adults enthusiastically discussed the storylines, and in that moment I felt, we did it. We risked everything, and it really works. This series changed everything. We proved that Japanese animation can be more than just entertainment for children, but an art form that touches the hearts of all generations. We learned that true transformation begins with risk, courage, and the willingness to give up a part of ourselves for a greater purpose. I learned the main thing. Sometimes you need to roll up all your fears, doubts, and rejections into one force and just move forward. Every crisis, every failure is a chance to become stronger. And even when the world screams that you can't, you have to listen to your own voice, because it is He who will show you the way. That moment taught us another lesson. Dreaming big doesn't tolerate compromise. If you want to change the world, you have to risk everything, give it your all, and never stop. Because that's when the magic becomes real. I'll never forget the moment our anime first made it outside of Japan. It was the same smell of paint and ink, the smell of the lamp in the old studio, but now it was mixed with something new, a sense of limitless possibilities. American television stations were interested in our work, and I sat there thinking, really? My little dream, created in a room where you could barely stand, is now reaching a foreign continent? At first it was scary. We didn't know if our art would be understood. This is strange, the critics said. This is not serious, the producers said. But then something happened that I couldn't forget for a long time. Children in New York laughed at our heroes, repeated phrases, empathized with their adventures. Adults discussed the storylines and emotional scenes. And I understood. Our dream had become a bridge between cultures. We stood in the studio, looking at the first reviews and translations. Our hearts were beating wildly. Every frame, every shadow on the paper, every sound we added on our own was now touching the hearts of others thousands of kilometers away from our room. We were a small team with a big dream, and the world finally heard us. Of course, this breakthrough was not without its challenges. We had to adapt to new languages, different cultures, and audience expectations that we had never seen before. The team worked twice as hard: adaptations, dubbing, quality control. Sometimes I would sit in my office until dawn, listening to the first dubbings and crying, from happiness and from fear that something would go wrong. But nothing went wrong. Anime became a cultural phenomenon. Festivals, fan clubs, cosplay, all of this was born from a small room, a lamp, and sheets of paper. We didn't just create a series. We created a world that people could feel, imagine, and love. This moment taught me the most important thing. Your dream has no boundaries if you are brave. If you believe in your voice, the world will definitely find a way to hear it. I realized that global breakthrough is not just about fame or money. It is about your art touching people's hearts, even those who have never heard your name. We changed the rules of the game. Now anime was not a children's entertainment. It was not a local cultural feature. It became a phenomenon that unites people from different countries, different generations, different languages. And it all started with one person who decided not to give up, who sat in the dark while the whole world slept. This moment was proof that true courage is born in crisis. That every night spent alone, every no you hear, every rejection becomes the force that one day turns a dream into a legend. And then I realized, now our anime is not just my story. It is the story of all those who dream, who draw in the darkness, who risk everything to make their voice heard. And I felt that we were ready for the next step. New challenges, new adventures, and even grander dreams. When the global breakthrough came, I realized one thing. True success always brings new challenges. Every series we released, every new story born in the studio became an expectation for millions. And this expectation was more pressing than any crisis we had gone through before. The team was starting to burn out. We were working on projects that were increasingly dependent on graphics, complex storylines, and music that had to sound perfect. Every day we woke up with the feeling that the deadline was chasing us and not letting us relax for a second. Sometimes I found myself thinking, we've turned a dream into a hard labor. Competition was growing. New studios, new talents, striving to take their place in the sun. And while this should have been a source of inspiration, it also brought doubts. Would we stay at the top? Would we be able to continue to create something unique, not repeating others? And then new financial challenges began. Streaming platforms, changing media behavior of viewers, a sharp increase in production volumes. All this put pressure on the studios. I had to look for new models of cooperation, take risks with partnerships, learn to adapt to the global market. Sometimes it was scary. My heart was pounding, like in the early days of creating short films, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss again. But we learned to look at problems differently. We turned every crisis into fuel. Team burnout. We changed schedules, implemented new approaches, started listening to each other more. Competition? It forced us to become even more creative, to find our voice among hundreds of others. Financial difficulties? We looked for new formats, partnerships, new platforms to spread our stories. And you know what was amazing? Every challenge made us stronger. Every defeat became a lesson, not the end. I began to understand that fame is not only applause and recognition, but also responsibility. Responsibility to the team, to the audience, to the very dream that was once born in a dark room on an old table. We began to focus on new genres, on deeper stories, on emotions that could touch the hearts of people in any corner of the world. We invested in young authors, gave them the freedom to create and take risks. And this bore fruit. New stories that conquered the hearts of fans, new formats that went beyond the boundaries of traditional animation. This period taught me the most important thing. Success does not mean stopping. Fame always has a price, and your task is to pay it wisely. Your art, your team, your dream are the most valuable things there are. And even when the world is pressing, when deadlines are killing, when competitors are sneaking up, you must remember, a crisis is not the end, but an opportunity for a new breakthrough. And it was at this time that I realized that we were ready for a new phase, not just to survive, not just to create, but to lead a new generation of fans, new artists and writers. Because if we learn to turn every challenge into an opportunity, every sleepless night into inspiration, we can create stories that will outlive us all. Today, anime is not just a TV screen or a streaming platform. It is a cultural phenomenon, a language of emotions, a way of seeing the world through stories, created by the hands of people who once sat in small rooms, faced poverty, rejection, and constant doubt. We have come a long way, from a lamp in the dark to a global phenomenon, and this journey is still ongoing. Now we are facing new challenges: market oversaturation, digital technologies, artificial intelligence, new formats of content consumption. Every day brings new solutions, new risks. Sometimes it seems that the world is moving faster than we can keep up. But I remember the lessons of all the previous years. Adapt quickly, turn crisis into fuel, lead, not follow. These are the principles that help us stay alive in this ever-changing world. I look at the young writers who come into the studio and see in their eyes what I once saw in myself: fear, doubt, but also an irresistible desire to create. I remind them, every sleepless night, every no you hear, every defeat is just part of the journey. Don't give up. Because if we learn to transform difficulties into opportunities, if we can boldly step outside the usual, the world will see our stories and fall in love with them. Today, anime inspires people all over the world. We see fans in New York, London, Paris, Sao Paulo. They laugh, cry, and dream with the characters that they once drew in an old room on an old table. It's an incredible feeling, knowing that your dreams have not only come true, but have also become a part of other people's lives.